Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and I am very, very pleased to have a pioneer in independent media joining me, not only to discuss the anniversary of 9/11, which is literally just around the corner a couple days from now, but also a amazing achievement in independent media. My good friend and the publisher of the River Cities Reader, Todd McGreevy, has recently surpassed his 1,000th printed publication. It's right here. It has a killer cover. I just love the shield. I love the Hydra. It was absolutely amazing. So before we even get going, Todd, what I want to talk about is your origin story 1,001 issues ago now, and how you made the decision to step up to the plate and do what most in independent media still don't do: start a print publication that went against the grain of the mainstream media voice.
An origin story. Wow, wasn't expecting that, but thank you for the opportunity and thanks for having us on. My wife Kathleen McCarthy and I own and started the publication, the River Cities Reader, in 1993. We were monthly back then for 20 issues. We were monthly, and then in 1995 we went to weekly. We were weekly for 13 years, and then over time we went to bi-weekly. I think that happened when the 2008 crash happened and everything fell out. And then we went to monthly, a few years ago. So over the last 29 plus years, we've reached 1,001 issues, and we start our 30th year next month, ironically. So these milestones are kind of back to back, if you will. The origin story comes from when I had a different publication called the Slowfish newspaper. We called it the Quad Cities Underwater Rag. We're here in the Quad Cities. Many of your listeners know that's where you live now, in the Bettendorf, Davenport, Iowa, Moline, Rock Island, East Moline, Illinois. Even though that's 5 cities, they call it the Quad Cities. So we started the Slowfish. A buddy of mine, Pete Scrow, and I went to high school together, and we started here. And after we graduated from college, he was a musician. I was a visual artist. We started an arts and music rag, and we kind of dabbled in politics. I met my now wife, Kathleen, through a mutual friend, and she started writing in our paper, the Slowfish, about, of all things, outcome-based education. If you remember those days during the George H.W. Bush days, but that was the rage. That was like the precursor, we think, to Common Core, if you will, or No Child Left Behind. It was called outcome-based education. And there was some school board members here locally who were against it, and Kathleen had picked up on it, and she was paying attention back then, even this is 1991, to those topics. So she brought a little more gravitas to our publication, if you will, and we had her featured as a guest commentary. And then in 93, she and I decided to do our thing on our own, and we started the River Cities Reader. Of course, we have to give credit to the Chicago Reader, which is where this whole, he said I was a pioneer. I might be a pioneer in the Quad Cities, but the true pioneers are the ones who started, like the Chicago Reader, the Village Voice, the San Francisco Bay Guardian, if you will, who actually happens to be an Iowan who started that paper out in San Francisco. But meanwhile, we actually contacted the publisher of the Chicago Reader back then, Bob Roth is his name, and asked him for permission to run one of his columns, The Straight Dope. Many of your readers might know about The Straight Dope. It's a famous column by Cecil Adams in Chicago. And he said, Todd, we really appreciate your efforts to do independent media, but we don't really want to support readers out there. We just lost a lawsuit with the Twin Cities Reader. They sued for the rights to the word reader, of all things. That's like suing for the rights to the word, chronicle or
Post
dispatch
or anything.
Yeah. It's like, really? Wow. And especially when the Weekly Reader, which is where Chicago, got their cadence, if you will, came from the Weekly Reader that was in the schools. It was a primer in the schools that was published, called the Weekly Reader. So, ironically, total sidebar, the Weekly Reader later got bought by Philip Morris. Did you know this?
No, I didn't know.
Yes, Jim Hightower has a column about this, of all things, and they bought it, and they turned it into. They kept it as a scholastic publication, but they did anti-smoking articles in it where they could have full double-page, spreads of the camel. What's Joe the camel?
Yes.
Tisk, don't smoke, but yet we're shoving all these images in your face, at a young age. So it was kind of a backdoor way of getting all that cigarette advertising in kids' hands. So total sidebar, but anyway, there's the origin story, Jason. Kathy and I started in '93, and there's been a lot of people along the way that have helped us. From Jeff Wickman, who helped us get started, to Mike Schultz has to, he's still with us all these years later. He's our arts editor. He's our workhorse. Without Mike, we have no River Cities Reader. He and I went to college at Augustana together here in Rock Island. He's still on board. Jeff Ignatius was our managing editor for 13 years. He brought a great level of aptitude and research to our publication. So anyway, that's the short version.
So I want to get into not only this new law that's going to be enacted on the other side of the river in Illinois with no cash bail, and the fact that now second-degree murder suspects are going to be part of the catch and release, that you'll no longer have the ability to call a police officer and have somebody leave your home or your property for trespassing. The most they're going to be able to do is give that individual a ticket. In a moment, we definitely got to go over that because our communities are so close to one another. I drive 5 minutes and I'm over at the Tax Slayer Center on the other side of the river. But you were gracious enough to tap me for this article right here: Top 5 Domestic Tyranny Steps Enacted by the U.S. Government After September 11th, 2001. And in it, we discuss Homeland Security, the Patriot Act, fusion centers, the strengthening of the Five Eyes Alliance, and even signature reduction. Tell my audience why you thought that this was an important topic and why you tapped me to do this.
Well, every September we should all be. I mean, the tragedies and the fallout of 9/11 are just, we're kind of inured to it. Oh yeah, you take your belt off when you go through you take your shoes off. You can't bring toothpaste or whatever on an airline. I mean, the nonsense continues unabated, despite all of the proof that it doesn't stop any terrorism. It doesn't stop people from bringing weapons on planes. I think you've even covered this stuff. The TSA is horrible. But yet we just go with it. We just it's just like water on a rock, and it's the boiling frog. It's the total boiling frog, the slow boiling frog, and we're continuing to boil and boil with the levels of tyranny. And so every September we should be taking a pause and going, where have we come, and what's happened since that horrific day? And of course, you being one of the foremost experts on the topic, living just down the street from me, I would be remiss if I didn't reach out to you and say, hey Jason, it's another September, let's have a reflection. And we talked about it, and I people like lists, if you will, and I thought, let's just limit it to like the top 5 things that there's the 1001 issue cover. That's an illustration, by the way, that was just serendipitous. That's Bruce Walters, another contributor to the River Cities Reader, a longtime arts educator here in the Quad Cities. He's a phenomenal visual artist and an educator. He has an exhibit at Blackhawk College, and that's one of the images in his exhibit. His exhibit is titled "When the Stars Threw Down Their Spears." There's a write-up about it in the Reader, if you will. It's on display through October. But that image just was perfect for our timing here, and it would help illustrate the travesty that happened. And I think the piece you did was succinct, and it gets cuts to the bone. If you refresh the page where we have it at the Reader's website, Jason, you'll see I've got the color version of the Bush signing. And when you go back and you look at the images of Bush signing, there's numerous ones that look like this out there. It's because he re-signs it over the years too. There's a re-signing, so you got to figure out which one's the first signing. It's kind of moot. But what's very interesting is to watch the body language of these people around this signing of this document. They are gleeful. They are just wringing their hands over how wonderful this is, how just so great this is going to be. For what? For what? So you can surveil Americans, so you can have another slush fund to throw a bunch of money down a black hole. We don't know where it goes. That's what this, it speaks volumes. So, so back to the top 5. People forget about the fusion centers that were created. That was a major, major thing.
Let's talk about that, because in this country, we have almost 100 fusion centers that are recognized. More than likely, there are a plethora of these things elsewhere that are masquerading as other entities. But when I did this article, I wanted to make it extremely clear that everybody was really targeted. It didn't matter whether you were on the right or left side of the spectrum. In other words, they were going after the black bloc. Many would say that's a precursor to Antifa. They were going after organizations like Cop Watch that were holding to accountable police brutality cases. And then on top of that, they extended it to the militia movement. But really, anybody that would question a quote unquote new world order, 9/11, the current tax system. It even highlighted films such as Zeitgeist and America, Freedom to Fascism as these kind of tools for domestic terror. This is now well over a decade ago. The reports came out in 2008 and 2009. Here we are in 2022, and now the mantra from the administration in charge is that the greatest threat, again, is white supremacy and domestic terror. You almost never hear anymore about Al-Qaeda, and ISIS. Instead, we are the enemy at home outwardly, and they have more resources than ever, Todd.
Anybody who questions authority, anybody who questions the legitimacy of the government actions or their policies is a threat to the government. And subsequently, they've built this, phalanx around themselves to protect their lifestyle, to protect their control, to protect their power. It's so cliche, but the authorities have forgotten the oath of office they took. I mean, that's the ultimate contract we have with our government. Who should be in charge? We, the people, obviously. Are we? No, we're not. Not when you get on an airplane. The rules for us, rules for them are just everywhere you look. It's so that the hypocrisies are just paramount. Legion, in this article, what would these fusion centers turn up if they focus their collaborative resources on the following verbs that are right from the language of the fusion centers: detecting, preventing, investigating, and responding to criminal activity within our own government agencies and elected offices. What would happen if they turn their eye inward a little bit instead of outward?
And let me say this: they don't seriously have their vision outward to stop quote unquote crime or terror. And I think that was abundantly clear and illustrated just a few weeks, almost a month ago, when I was out in New York and I was getting ready to speak at the Reawaken America tour in Batavia, New York. And the day before the event, the Attorney General's office from New York sent a letter to Clay Clark and Michael Flynn saying that they would be responsible for any types of violence that the Reawaken America tour brought to the region, which is totally and completely ludicrous. They've been doing this for well over a year. There has been absolutely zero violence. We were moved from Rochester to Batavia about a month and a half before because we got canceled because of this hysteria and public outcry. And then they're so concerned about violence that less than an hour away in Buffalo, about 50 miles from our event, Salman Rushdie puts on an event where he's speaking to a bunch, mostly leftists. Rushdie's a staunch atheist, obviously came into infamy via the satanic verses where he took on the Quran. And by the way, I'm a free speech guy. I think you should be able to do that. Now, for those unfamiliar, Rushdie went into hiding for many years because the Khomeini at the time in Iran had declared a fatwa, in other words, open season, to kill this guy. Mm-hmm. And now, again, if they were so worried about violence and crime and terror, don't you think they might have had a warning or got some kind of a click that maybe they should protect Rushdie from being stabbed 11 times on stage? The man was stabbed 11 times. Nobody was worried of violence at that event. It was swept under the rug. There were no parallels there. Instead, the Associated Press just put out a massive hit piece on the Great Awaken, the Reawaken America tour, Michael Flynn, and We the People as the largest domestic terror threat out there, and that Flynn is a military individual that is now leading this attack. I mean, this is extensive. It is a must read. I read it start to finish. They went after Christian nationalism. They went after Trump. They went after MAGA Republicans. And they really went after anybody who would dare to question an election. I mean, this thing is long.
Wow.
No mention of what I just said. So why are these fusion centers here if they can't stop, Todd, an actual radical from getting up on stage and stabbing a man almost to death while they intimidate others and, basically put out this sentiment that they're a bunch of white supremacists, when I can't listen, Kash Patel speaks there. I can't tell you how many black preachers are there. Look, there's a Christian flavor to it, no doubt. So what? They're not a domestic terror threat. They're not a violent threat, but that's the portrayal. Speak to that, because we see more and more of that in the mainstream.
What I would be concerned about is a false flag, to be totally blunt. You get a letter from the Attorney General telling you that you're going to be responsible for any violence that happens in the region. Well, that sounds like a perfect setup for somebody to send in some kind of COINTELPRO to strike some bullshit up. I mean, that's exactly what I would be worried about. Amazing that the Attorney General even cares about a rally about the great, I don't even, how many people were at that event approximately?
I would say that because they had to move the event, they ended up actually, I think, getting about 600 more seats. So it was somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000. And it peaked out, I think in Tampa, Florida would be the largest one that he threw. And that was about 8,000. Now, Vice has had this series, QAnon, In Search of Q. And they had their first season last year on Vice, and I watched it, and I actually reviewed it, and I thought that although it was extremely partisan, they had done a better job than the HBO series, which largely focused on 8chan, 4chan, 8kun, the Watkins, and its origin story there, but not really where it came from. Basically, the Watkins involvement, and then they tried to make it sound like Bannon and Flynn may have been involved, and they found Q. It's, Ron Watkins and his son. They decide in Vice they're going to do a season 2. But now it's not really In Search of QAnon. It's Let's Go After the Reawaken America tour. So they've had 2 episodes so far, all focused on the Reawaken America tour, all focused on that. If you dare to question an election, you're part of the big lie, and, you're a threat to democracy. And this is the push. They're saying that you no longer have a voice if you have a political view that is in opposition to what has been installed. Let me repeat that. What has been installed. Doesn't matter. The puppet in chief cannot speak. We just did a watch along with his Labor Day speech. It's hard to call it a speech because it's just a ramble fest where he can barely read off a paper and he repeats himself again and again, and he's constantly going into these weird delusional stories of his past that have probably never happened. He's pushing a guy, Fetterman, who also can't speak. I don't know if you've seen the video clip. Don't worry, folks. He's got dogs. It gets vicious every once in a while over there. He's pushing a guy named Fetterman who can't speak either because he had a stroke in May. And I don't know if you've seen this clip. We played it yesterday. But he gets up there for 2 minutes, okay, literally 2 minutes, Fetterman, and he can't talk. In fact, I may have to play that to show people just how far we've come, to a point where they're not even trying to put out slick officials that can speak and bamboozle you that way. Instead, they'll just gaslight you and tell you that Joe Biden is the most popular president of all time. Meanwhile, they couldn't get 100 people, Todd, at this event. Let me repeat that. There wasn't 100 people at this Labor Day election event. We're going to show people this right now. We got 100 people plus over at our event a little over a year ago for the quote-unquote Greater Reset Tour. And the most popular president in the world at a campaign event can't get 100 people, and they're pushing this guy. So I'm going to play this unfettered. He can't even speak for 2 minutes, folks. We're at 2:41, okay? He wants to get off the stage about 5 minutes. These are the politicians they're pushing. They are malleable puppets that can't even remember their talking points. Here we go.
Steel workers, Steel workers, what an honor it is to be here with you today. Just earlier today, I was so proud to march with you in downtown Pittsburgh. Labor Day, happy Labor Day. You know, how many homes does Dr. Oz have? 9, 10, 11? But I guarantee you, he doesn't have a steel mill right across from one of his mansions, you know, but you're going to have one senator that lives across the street from a steel mill. Because let's tell us something. In the Mon Valley, we make steel. We make steel. In New Jersey, Dr. Oz makes crudité. I'm going to make it really simple for all of you. It's a choice. It's a choice. An ally, the sacred life of union, the union way of life, the union way of life. Or someone like Dr. Oz that would take it away and try to destroy it. I cannot think of anything more un-American than trying to take away the union way of life. It's real simple. Send me to Washington, D.C. Any choice in front of me, any bill, union way, the anti-union way, every single time going with the union way of life and be.
This is where it gets real bad, folks. You thought that was bad? Here we go. The last minute is the.
Please understand the stakes in this race. Send me to Washington, D.C. so I can work with Senator Casey and I can champion the union way of life in in D.C. Thank you very much, and it's an honor. I live 8 minutes away from here, and when I leave tonight, I got 3 miles away, Dr. Oz in his mansion in New Jersey. You've got a friend and you have an ally. Send me to Washington, D.C. Thank you very much. Thank you, Steelworkers.
So 2 minutes, and he can barely speak. And this isn't to pick on somebody who's had a stroke, Todd, okay? But this is someone who is obviously not there, who is a malleable puppet, who is one of the only politicians that will even stand on a stage next to Biden. And I'm sorry, if this guy gets into office, there's something wrong with our electoral system, because there's no way that this lieutenant governor that's never had a real job, is a trust fund kid, and can barely speak, would be voted into office in the Senate in Pennsylvania if it's not rigged. Dare I say that? I mean, I might get thrown off of YouTube. Oh, man, I'm an election denier. I promote the big lie. What are your thoughts, Todd?
Well, several things come to mind. Number one, there used to be a time when third parties were even discussed. I've been heavily involved with the Libertarian Party over the years. The Green Party used to, be, remember Ralph Nader? That's like, they've just erased that from all of our view anymore. The third parties don't even have a chance anymore. I don't know why that is. That's a whole nother discussion. Second thing that comes to mind, as you asked earlier, and I do want to get back to this guy in New Jersey, and about unions, because there's something specific I want to say. But you asked earlier about why are they going after the Great Reawakening, the Reawaken America tour, if you will, right? Because they want Americans to remain asleep. That's why. We can't wake people up. No. We don't want people questioning authority, questioning the narrative. No. So that's why. I mean, obviously, Clay and yourself and the others that are participating are over the target, or else you don't get flack. So that's why right there. The other thing is on this union thing, and I was trying to look it up on my other computer here, but Kathleen was telling me that she was listening to a podcast recently. I got to nail this down for you. But with regards to the unions, apparently up until like the 70s, maybe it was the 50s, like there was thousands of union strikes. The unions were really active. They were, there was a lot of activity all the time about unions. And then they got co-opted by both sides of the two-headed bird of prey. So this facade that the one side's anti-union, one side's pro-union, according to this podcast Catherine's listening to, I need to get the details for you. If you look at the stats about there's hardly any more strikes, and there's no more strike because they've just been co-opted. So they want the people to think there's strife. They want the people to think that there's a us versus them, but really behind the scenes they're being co-opted. That would be my comment to you.
No, I absolutely agree. And look, I'm not a Republican, and I'm not somebody who's against unions. I understand that there are strength in numbers and that workers sometimes have to get together to demand the proper types of compensation for their work, whether that be a living wage or whether that be health insurance, etc. But like you said, they've been so corrupted by both sides of the aisle that they're no longer as effective for what they were set up to be. And
Right.
just because you vote one way or the other, that supposedly you vote against the Democrats, whether that be libertarian, third party, or the Republicans, doesn't necessarily mean that you're anti-union. I would say that the vast majority of us, and I'm talking about the American people, want a system that empowers a middle class and allows people to have a family and a home and a car and a way of living that is elevated to that level of comfort of the traditional middle class or beyond for a 40 to 60 hour work week. But that is certainly not the reality the vast majority of us are living under currently, especially with inflation, which supposedly, Todd, was transitory. Okay. And
Right.
and two, this economic system where supposedly we can pass an anti-inflation act, flood the country with more money, and somehow that is going to economically empower the average person of the middle class. It's absolutely absurd, Todd.
Well, and back to the rigged elections for a second here, if we're jumping around. Do you remember, I don't know if it was like 2-3 weeks ago, Lindell had like a weekend long marathon.
I had actually been invited to speak at that.
I
got the invite, and it was in Missouri. It was the week after the Reawaken America tour. I kind of wish I had gone, but as you know, Todd, a lot of people are under this impression that I'm making all this money or that these events, I'm rolling in it, that these events somehow pay me. None of that is true. All this comes out of my own pocket, and I do these things because I'm not a Republican. And I'm not a conservative, and I'm not necessarily talking about those issues. In fact, I'm honing more in on transhumanism and the future, if indeed these people get their way in the predator class, of a quote-unquote great reset, which is really just repackaged New World Order propaganda. And I find that these are the most honest people in the mainstream and the alternative right now. So all those people that want to come after Lindell, at least he's in the arena. At least he's putting his money where his mouth is. At least he's having other people speak on these subjects that do have expertise. And at least he's reaching out to people like myself to expand that narrative even beyond these elections. But what did you have to say about his presentation?
And yes, he's in the fight, and he's doing something. And at the end of that long, because Kathleen watched it live the whole time, she's been studying the election fraud for years with many people here in Scott County. And at the end of it, Lindell had a call to action. There's 3,100 plus counties in America. And he had a call to action that everybody in your county, you can go to your county auditor or your clerk, whatever they're called, that manages elections, and you can file an affidavit to preserve the evidence of the 2020 election, because there's a sunset where that data gets deleted. And sure enough, here in Iowa, I was looking for the letter. I'm trying to find it. Gosh, it's I should have been more prepared. But many people in Scott County sent the letter to our county auditor, who happens to be a Republican. And guess what? Our Secretary of State in Iowa, Pate, P-A-T-E, he is a Republican. And many people in Iowa reached out to do the same thing and preserve the evidence of the election data. And the Secretary of State has put an edict out to all the auditors: do not comply, do not provide that information, destroy the information. Gee, I wonder if there. So what we're trying to say here is that the Republicans are just as bad as the Democrats, sometimes
if not worse.
Yes,
If not worse.
totally.
That's the thing.
Totally.
Listen, all these people that are super delusional that think that we're going to have a red wave 60 days from now in the midterms, I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. We haven't fixed the infrastructure. We haven't fixed the system. The only way that you're going to get anywhere near the outcomes that you would in a free and fair election where it is one person, one vote, is if you come out in droves and the polling outside has that person up 10 to 20%. I mean, it's literally going to have to be that much. Otherwise, a lot of these things are going to be flipped, whether you like it or not. And it's because we've built an infrastructure based on fractional voting,
Yes,
on systems like Diebold before Dominion, in which these machines and those who control them control the outcomes of these elections and are not subject to any kind of meaningful audit after the fact. And I would encourage people, you talked about Mike Lindell and what he's doing. Timothy Shea is somebody who I've seen at these Reawaken America tours both times. He's the head of the MAGA Institute, and he's really got his head on straight. He says a lot of things Jason Bermas says. He's critical of many of those on the right, like Peter Thiel and others. But what I like about what he's saying is we need not only people to register and show up, but be at the polling stations to visually show how dominant one candidate is over the other. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's brilliant because the powers that be are fixing the system within a certain bracket, if you will. They can't overturn a huge win, but they can overturn a close one with this sleight of hand, with this fractional vote weighting. We wrote about vote weighting in 2016, and I'm trying to give you a link to that so you can pull it up on the screen. That link is not working in the chat, unfortunately.
Yeah, it says the requested page couldn't be found.
URL didn't transfer all the way for some reason. I don't know what's going on there. Let me do
Gotcha.
this. Dang it, it's not doing it. Very strange.
That is weird.
Yeah, I'm just gonna reply to your email real quick, and you'll have it in a second.
I got it. I think I figured it out. Go ahead, keep talking.
Yeah. And in that article, I mean, this is going back. Heck, this is 6 years old now. We talk about this, and I interviewed one of the leading experts at University of Iowa with regards to election machines and technology, and he confirmed that this stuff happens. I mean, this is not conspiracy. This is what's going on inside the systems of your voting machines. Everybody, it's happening. So to continue to have the mantra just beat over the head by the Vices of the world, or the HBOs, or the NPRs, or I guess what's their name? Frontline came out with a new piece about January 6th, which I haven't watched yet. So
that was in conjunction. The Frontline piece was in conjunction with that Associated Press piece that I was talking about. Yeah, they referenced it several times.
And when this person looked at me and said, did you see that Frontline piece about January 6th? I said, no. Did they talk about all the undercover FBI agents that started the violence? He looked at me like, what? What? I mean, just not even remotely, did they talk about Ray Epps and that? What? He just didn't know where to go. Of course not, he said, so it's so hard to get across to people. The Electoral College process was going to go through the motions that it should have gone through. And that is where a senator or the joint sessions of the Congress and the Senate meet. If there's a controversy in a state, a legislator raises their hand and says, we have a controversy about our votes that are coming forward from the electoral system. And then it should get tabled for a hearing, get through all 50 states. Are there 6 or 7 states that have a controversy? Then we have a hearing of evidence about the votes in those states and how the Electoral College votes are suspect, if you will. And then the bodies convene over a hearing of evidence and determine next steps. That's what the process was supposed to do. And so if you are pro-Trump and you want that process to happen, you wouldn't do an insurrection to tear it down so they would stop the process. I don't know how to get that across.
First of all, insurrections in reality are armed. and they are actually trying to take over the systems of government, and they stay. And they often, okay, not often, almost always involve high-level military personnel and their soldiers. None of that happened. None of that happened. Zero, zip, zilch.
Even though the mantra is repeated over and over, they were armed. They were armed.
There's no armed. And in fact, they did that in the QAnon sense. Vice piece, again, armed insurrection, armed insurrection, armed insurrection. Look, there was some violence there. We taped it. There were people that brought flagpoles and hit people with it. Someone had a sledgehammer that was immediately handed over to the police force that was going on. A lot of people won't want to talk about that. Yep. There were literally no guns. Let me repeat that. No guns. You got a dementia-ridden puppet that's still talking about this thing, and then talking about those that would oppose the government, and says, basically, you wouldn't have a chance because we have F-15s. Really? Is that the rhetoric that we're hearing at January 6th, that the people that showed up didn't have a chance because we had F-15s? No. The rhetoric is that lives were in danger in the Senate and the Congress, and they could have changed the way democracy functioned in this constitutional republic. They don't even call it a constitutional republic because they don't want to let people get hip to that fact that we have separations of power, all right, that the federal government isn't the end-all, be-all. Speak to that.
Well, number one, the only guns at the January 6th event were the ones that shot Ashley Babbitt.
Correct.
Let's keep that in mind. That little discussion keeps, like just murdered, just totally murdered on tape. I mean, just amazing. And as far as the republic, I mean, that's one of the things that's in the Constitution. That is the federal Constitution guarantees a republic with a small r in all 50 states. That's the primary function of the federal government, is to guarantee a republic, not a democracy. The word democracy doesn't appear in any document, any founding documents. In fact, in the Federalist Papers, there's a whole essays about how these founding fathers eschewed the term democracy, and they didn't want a democracy. They didn't want a tyranny of the majority. The old adage goes, a democracy is two wolves and a sheep, voting for what's for lunch.
Absolutely. A lot of people think, again, that because we have democratic processes in this country, that we are a democracy. But in truth, the reason that we have those democratic processes is so we can have the separation of power, so that you can vote on a local level for city council, your state senator, your state Congress, and then who's going to be the representative on a national level. You're supposed to have the checks and balance of a true judicial, executive, and legislative. But now we seem to be in a system post 9/11, which I believe I highlighted very well in this piece, Top 5 Domestic Tyranny Steps Enacted by the U.S., that are completely outside the power of the elected executive, a.k.a. the administration of Trump and who he put into power. And even to Biden. I mean, Biden is the most outward puppet we've ever seen. But it is that structure based in continuity of government, based in Homeland Security, based in the Patriot Act, based in black sites and fusion centers, and even signature reduction that has almost no, if any, oversight over the democratic processes of this constitutional republic. Speak to that.
Well, I recall years ago, I used to listen to National Public Radio. Well, I still do listen to NPR just to monitor the propaganda, if you will. But I used to send them money here in Iowa. I support them that much. That they used to be balanced. They leaned left, sure, but they used to be balanced. And I remember getting in an argument with that used to have an ombudsman for Iowa Public Radio. And I remember getting through to the ombudsman because of their biased statements about Ron Paul and about the U.S. Constitution and some interpretations of the Constitution. And I remember having a dialogue with the ombudsman, and he's saying out loud to me, no, we have a democratic socialist country. That's what we are. Out loud. So when you have somebody who is the ombudsman of your state-owned public radio, that outwardly admitting that they see this country as a democratic socialist, country, then you know where we are. And maybe for all intents and purposes, practically we do.
No, we do. I listen, I would absolutely agree with that assessment, in the fact that there are just so many people that are beholden to the government on some level, whether that is a welfare type handout, whether that is a social security type program, and especially after what we witnessed the last 2 to 3 years, where you have people taking out PPP loans that are supposedly going to be, we're going to forgive those loans. It doesn't look like everybody's getting those loans forgiven. But again, it's a system of the state that is giving you resources, and they're acting like they're empowering you. But what's really happening is you are becoming enslaved into this system, which is going to make you jump through more and more hoops and have more and more regulations if you just want to take part in regular society. And under this administration, it seems like they are gearing up to empower the IRS as an enforcement center for those that would try to economically get out of the system or just challenge the current political regime in any way, shape, or form to go after them. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are, I remember doing a podcast years ago with Corey Ibe and Clyde Cleveland called Common Sense Revisited, named after the book Clyde Cleveland wrote called Common Sense Revisited. And we discussed our mutual friend Bob Schultz from We the People Foundation. And Bob is one of the people who took on the IRS more effectively than anybody, if you will, in my memory. And in fact, Bob was featured in that movie, Freedom to Fascism. There's a whole section in that movie that we talked about earlier, Freedom to Fascism, where Bob and We the People Foundation were, he held hearings on Capitol Hill where he had IRS agents come as whistleblowers and talk about how they are treating Americans. And it was actually put on C-SPAN back at the time. That's back when C-SPAN was, unbiased. And they actually said, this has got public information. This is interesting.
Well, I will say this, C-SPAN still allows for you to get a lot of the raw footage. For instance, that clip that I just played of Fetterman, only available on C-SPAN. But you know what they didn't include? They didn't include the Biden speech. So they're also, exactly. They're also selecting what they're going to air and what they're not going to air. So that was really just a 5-minute segment. I had to go to PBS to actually watch the Biden speech. And we're seeing that more and more in the mainstream media, where even the alternative media or the supposed opposing voice isn't really going through the full speeches anymore, even though they're 20 minutes or less. Instead, they're kind of cherry picking moments. Look, it's not great that Biden is talking about MAGA Republicans being extremists and anti-democracy and part of a big lie. But at the same time, we should be focusing on the fact he's not coherent, that he can barely speak, that he can barely read, that he's not actually in charge. And like you said, it is alarming that these outlets that used to be pretty neutral, whether it be NPR, PBS, or C-SPAN, now they seem to be leaning toward an agenda or a narrative that has been pre-planned and is really in lockstep and collusion with one another.
Oh, it's complete. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, that's a great segue. If you don't mind to just indulge me with a selfless plug for the 1000th issue of the Reader, that cover that you held up. This is an illustration of exactly what you're talking about. And that's why, and we worked hard on this cover with Ed Newman and his wife, Monica. And, that cover is, it's the Hydra, it's the dragon, if you will, with all the different, effectively, we're trying to talk about captured agencies is what we're talking about here. We have the agencies on the neck, if you will. You've got a drone for the military industrial complex with NASA, the CIA, TSA, NSA, DHS. You've got the piggy bank with the education system and the banks with BlackRock, the Fed, IRS, IMF, the Bank of International Settlements and Wall Street. You've got the FCC, which is, captured by the Google and Apple and Facebook and Twitter and all that. You've got the medical complex there in the middle head there with, NEA, NIH, AMA. I mean, it goes on. It's in the news media is there. NPR is at the lead of the pack. Fox, CNN, they're all captured. They're captured by these agencies. And, we've got on the neck of the Hydra, offshore account numbers. in our view, all of this, everybody, the big why question, it's all about money laundering. This is why those guys are wringing their hands over the signing of the Patriot Act and smiling in glee because of all the money laundering that's going to happen with this act under the guise of your security. That's what's going on, everybody. That is what's happening. They're laundering money.
Absolutely. And at the same time, they are consolidating power. They are putting more authoritarian measures into our lives on a daily basis. And now they are full-on censorship and trying to control this quote-unquote great narrative that is being pushed by the World Economic Forum and other members of the predator class. The website, Todd, is rcreader.com. Again, I want to remind everybody, you can check out my top 5 domestic tyranny steps enacted by the U.S. government after September 11th, 2001 right now. Let my audience know what else is out there on the website right now, how they can get involved, and how they can support you, Todd, because, again, it is no small task to have a printed publication get past 1,000 issues, especially one as important as yours.
Well, I greatly appreciate that, Jason. And you can subscribe to our free email newsletters. We do that weekly with updates of all our stories. We update stories daily at our website, but weekly we push out a email alert update, if you will. If you don't mind going on to the screen, Jason, I can show people quickly what to do there. Let's see, I lost you. There we go. Yeah, if you scroll down on the right there, the right side, I want to point out a couple things real quick on the right. Keep going, if you will. Number one, there's the current issue as a PDF. If you want to look at that the printed edition on stands. Also there on the right is we have some tagged content, which is we've got stuff about sheriffs. We've written about sheriffs a lot. We write about Assange a lot. There's our January 6th coverage, which you participated in. We're really proud of that coverage. I encourage people to read that. There's our conversation about 1984. And then there's our conversation about 9/11. And those are all, if you click on that 9/11 link, you'll see Jason's stories there. That'll get you there quickly. If you scroll down and see some other stuff that he's done with us as well, others have written about 9/11 as well. Below that, there are sections where you can subscribe to our free e-newsletter. And below that, there's a link to subscribe to a printed edition for $48 a year. It costs us $2 in postage and handling per edition. We will mail it to you first class. We make a couple bucks per issue, keep the doors open. So it's $4 a month. You can do that. Or you can click on any story. At the bottom of any story, you can make a contribution to us, a one-time or a monthly donation, annual, whatever you want to do. Every little bit counts, like you said. And we encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter at a minimum and stay up to date on what we're doing as independent media here in the Quad Cities.
Mr. McGreevy, it is a pleasure as always. I love what you do, and I'm so glad there are still people like you out there in this country that, again, it's not about left or right, folks. It's always about right and wrong. We have to come together. We have to get past these labels of conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, because they're coming for all of us. Doesn't matter whether you identify as a purple polka dotted giraffe. If you're a man, a woman, you're white, black, Hispanic, Asian, they don't care. They're coming for you. This is it. This is the takeover, and every move they make is one to make you more subservient to their narratives and their authoritarianism. So we must constantly push back, and knowledge is truly power. And this man is giving you actual truth, actual knowledge, actual perspectives that push against these lies and obfuscations. So what would you like to leave the audience with, my friend?
Well, I'd like to leave the audience with, so as the American Republic goes, so will go the world. That the reason that the powers that be are after Americans so hard is because we are the last place where we have a rule of law in writing that we should be following. We have oaths of office we should be following. We have the infrastructure. We have the history. We have the tradition. We have the mechanisms to have a free and open society. And they're doing everything they can to squash that, because when America falls, and the rest of the world will fall, and then that new world order can be put in place.
Mr. McGreevy, a pleasure as always. We'll have to do it in the next couple months. Okay, my friend?
Thanks a lot, Jason. Take care.
Thank you. So there he is, Todd McGreevy. The website is rcreader, rcreader.com. That's where you can see my latest. I want to remind you guys that I am a documentary filmmaker. My films are all free. Loose Change Final Cut and Fabled Enemies deal with 9/11. Right now, a really important subject. We're about to hit that 21st anniversary. Hard to believe. But that is the moment. That is the moment where things flip on its head. It's not like it wasn't corrupt before that, but where the power moves came into play. And we had our first tastes of the fact check with the debunkers. And the first case of those that would smear the truth by saying, oh, they're 9/11 truthers. They're all conspiracy theorists. And then Truther went with every single conspiracy to move into the QAnon sense to discredit everybody. Invisible Empire, A New World Order to Find, and Shade the Motion Picture really give you a vast and wide array of what is actually going on and what the actual motives of these people are. You want to support this broadcast other than watching the films for free and sharing them. Consider buying me a coffee, $5, $10, $15. It means the world to me. In fact, we did get a tip from Adam Dees over on Rockfin. I want to thank you for that. That's another great way to support the broadcast. $9.99 a month or $99.99 for the year. That'll get you everybody's premium content. I give away everything. But for instance, The Last American Vagabond, who does great work, he's got some premium content out there. In fact, he should be releasing an exclusive premium interview with yours truly, either today or later this week. I'm really excited about that. You get Jay Dyer, you get AM Wake Up, Pasta Jardula, Steve Poikonen, Kim Iverson, and so many others. So another great way. It's like a Netflix for creators and truth. And by the way, never censored me. We're also on Rumble. 10,000 strong. We did it. Let's get to 20,000 strong. Let's make Rumble another viable option for truth. So guys, once again, I love you. I'm going to be back later with Richard Gage, Barbara Onager, and others talking about 9/11 specifically. It's not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. And I will see you all on the flip side.